Now, to sum up the early exit polls that we got about 15 minutes ago, we have winning numbers for the ruling PPP in 9 regions, 4 for the main opposition Democratic Party, and 3 areas are hotly contested right now. It's definitely going to be an intense couple of hours for the candidates and the 2 parties as they wait to find out their fate. What's for sure is that the outcome will be seen as a barometer of public sentiment toward the new government, as this is the first nationwide election under the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. Now, Hans, isn't that right? I mean, taking place roughly 3 weeks into the presidential People Power Party presidential candidate Yoon Suk-yeol's administration, what would the outcome of this election mean for the Yoon administration and more broadly for this country?
Well, it sounds as if we're going to continue the honeymoon phase for President Yoon for some time with these results. I mean, either way, I don't think the election results tonight would have likely put an end to President Yoon's honeymoon phase. As you pointed out, he's been in office for less than a month. If the DP had exceeded expectations, I think if the ruling party, if the PPP, had somehow failed to win 9 of the major races for the mayor's seats and the seats up in the governor's races as well, that might have been seen as a setback for President Yoon. But the reality is there have been international issues which seem to be driving in many respects the political climate here. President Yoon has actually managed to start his term with a fairly visible sign that he's on the case with geopolitics, having the Biden summit. In a way, that was almost a gift, I think, to the PPP to get that kind of visibility for the president. And also, as we heard from some of the people commenting in these reports, inflation, house prices, there are global problems right now that the PPP has already been elected to resolve. And it seems that the electorate now, the voters, are giving them another chance and ready to kind of shift things decisively toward the PPP from what these exit poll numbers are showing early on.
Right. I mean, are there key questions or factors that we should keep a close eye on that may be the deciding factor for this elections in the minds of the voters?
Well, I think if the PPP wins the majority of these 17 major seats, again for the governor's seats and the mayor's seats, but they fail to win Gyeonggi-do, that will be a sign that the DP's got some life left. It seems that the Democratic Party's got a lot of regrouping to do, and I don't think they have finished regrouping from these early numbers tonight. We could actually see a trouncing for the DP. I mean, the numbers so far in the exit polling suggest that the PPP, by the time the night is over, they might have 13 or 14 of the key seats, which would be quite a drubbing for the DP, given the way things were a few years ago. But I think my key question is going to be, where's the regrouping for the DP? If we're still going to see 2 viable parties, rather than just seeing the PPP dominant at the Blue House and at the local elections, if the DP can scratch out a victory in Gyeonggi-do and then combine that with the majority that they currently have in the National Assembly, that will be their best chance to kind of raise a platform and have an alternative answer to some of the economic policy issues that at least have traditionally been their strength, I think, at least looking for working class voters. The other question will be whether some of the minority parties can make a further dent in the DP and have an influence in that regrouping, but that remains to be seen.
Right, so let's try to decipher the exit poll numbers and get an overview of what the outcome means for South Korea's political landscape. Our Eun-ji joins us in the studio. Now, Eun-ji, this election is largely about whether the 3-week-old ruling PPP will win by a landslide or the main opposition DP will put up a good enough defense, if you will. What do the nationwide polls look like? I mean, how many of the 17 provincial governors and mayor seats do we expect the ruling PPP to win and the main opposition DP to take? Of course, 4 years ago, the DP took the lead in most big races, but we have been expecting for some time a turnaround in that.
Right, that's right. Back in 2018, the Democratic Party took 14 districts out of a total of 17. Of course, we can't rely on these numbers for sure, but these exit polls do give us an idea of what to expect. This year, we can see on the graphics here that exit polls show that the ruling Conservative Party will take 10 of the 17 metropolitan cities and provinces. The main opposition party is in the lead in 4 districts, and among the remaining regions, Gyeonggi, Daejeon, Sejong are key battlegrounds. We're going to see neck-and-neck battles in these regions, so we'll have to keep an eye on these 3 districts. Also, we have a separate exit poll from another news broadcaster, JTBC. JTBC also predicted that the People Power Party will be leading in 9 districts. And these exit polls were more or less in line with the opinion polls. Recent opinion polls had already projected that the People Power Party would take the lead in most districts, except for those in southwestern region considered as traditional Democratic Party strongholds.
Right. I want to zoom in on the Seoul mayoral race, and of course, probably the most hotly contested race of all, the Gyeonggi-do province governor. What are we seeing here? Because, as I said, according to the joint survey by KBS, NBC, SBS, the 2 are apart within a margin of error. The one by JTBC, that looks very pretty close as well. So what are we seeing?
Right, so if you take a look at the Seoul mayor race first, the ruling Conservative Party candidate Oh Se-hoon, who is also the current mayor of the city, is comfortably in the lead with more than 60%. With almost 60%. It's quite a wide margin, and Oh is seeking to become mayor of the capital city for the 4th time. Oh was actually elected in 2006 and 2010 and returned to the post with a by-election win in April 2021. A win will make him the city's longest-serving mayor and the first person to serve a 4th term as mayor of Seoul. And JTBC's exit poll also showed that he is in the lead with more than 60%.
Right. So, and as for the Gyeonggi-do province, it's a neck-and-neck race.
Oh, that's right. Next up is the governor of Gyeonggi-do province, where it's, like you said, a neck-and-neck race. Kim Eun-hye of the ruling party holds a slight lead over Kim Dong-yeon with 49.4%. But she is winning by less than 1%, so we'll have to continue to wait for the final outcome. JTBC also predicted that Kim Eun-hye will win with 49.6%. It's a really tough race, so we'll have to wait and see how that race ends.
You know, the main opposition Democratic Party has even gone on to say that winning Gyeonggi-do province alone may be good enough to make up for losing several other regions. So definitely a neck-and-neck race that we'll have to keep a close eye on throughout the night and perhaps even into the early morning hours. Now, the by-elections taking place for 7 vacant seats of the National Assembly are also drawing a lot of attention as former presidential candidates. If you remember, just back 2.5 months ago, Lee Jae-myung of DP and An Cheol-soo of PPP are running for parliamentary seats in G.
That's right. Like you said, Lee Jae-myung, who went up against current President Yoon Suk-yeol in the presidential race just 3 months ago, is running for a seat in the Gaeang district of Incheon. It's going to be a tough race, as exit polls show that Lee Jae-myung of the main opposition party is enjoying a slight lead in Gaeangbi district with 54.1%. Another district we have to look at is the Bundang A district. An Cheol-soo, who withdrew from the presidential race to endorse Yoon, is aiming to grab the seat representing the Bundang A district of Seongnam City as the ruling party candidate. He is leading by a wide margin with 64%. But as these numbers are just exit polls, we'll have to wait until the ballots are counted to know for sure.
Right, that is correct. What about the voter turnout for this election? I mean, just according to the early exit polls, that was a record high for an early exit poll for local elections. However, we're seeing a much lower final voter turnout.
That's right. Voter turnout tentatively for now is around 50%. So that means half the South Koreans out of almost 45 million eligible voters chose to cast their ballot. That's about 10 percentage points lower than the last elections 4 years ago, because back in 2018, more than 60% came out to vote.
Right. Hans, how do you expect this lower than expected turnout rate to impact the election results? I mean, is this more favorable for the ruling PPP or is it for the main opposition DP?
My first guess, Kan-young, would be it would favor the PPP. And I am wondering what the weather was like on this election day back in 2018. I don't know. Usually good weather means it's very good for voter turnout. It's easy to get out. But today was such a nice summer day that I think many people that might have otherwise voted chose to get out and enjoy the day, at least from what I could see around me. So I would think the people that got out today were really motivated, either to sustain the PPP and give President Yoon a little bit of a boost, but people were so tired. I mean, the general electorate, broadly speaking, has given the DP a chance over the last several years. And as we talked about with the presidential election, the DP had quite a fall from grace in that, even though Lee Jae-myung nearly won the presidency. Considering how overwhelming the support had been for the DP a few years ago, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. And I don't think the DP has yet shown the public how they can regroup, what alternative vision they're going to put forward for the country. A lot of the policy issues on housing and inflation and so forth that we keep talking about, the two parties are not necessarily all that far apart. And I think the public's ready for a change, especially after the COVID pandemic, too. I think the sense of moving beyond the pandemic and moving beyond the DP, this may have all kind of come to configure a victory for the PPP. And now if they do in all these local races, and even with a minority in the assembly still, the burden will be very much on them to deliver, because just as the voters have turned on the DP momentarily, they could turn on the PPP in a few years.
Right, so definitely a fatigue there that we're feeling amongst the voters. And of course, the internal feud that we've been witnessing internally in DP couldn't have worked in favor for them in the last couple of weeks leading up to this election.
Yeah, I think not at all. They needed to have something compelling to offer the country going forward. And it leaves me wondering, as we start to digest these numbers and we see that the DP is not likely to have any kind of clear regrouping tonight, where will the new ideas come from in the party? And here's where I look at some of the teenage candidates running from the minority parties. Look at No Seo-jin tonight, running for the Seoul City Council and the Justice Party. 19 years old. She touts herself as having been active in politics for longer than President Yoon, since she's been involved since age 15. Of course, she's got a long career ahead of her, but in the U.S., when we see the alternative visions now for the Democratic Party, we look at a lot of the younger people. Think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the U.S. Congress. Where's the next AOC for Korea? I don't want to just sort of graft American politics on Korean politics, but we may not. I mean, yes, we have Lee Jae-myung winning the seat out in Incheon, most likely for Gyeong, and we're going to have Ahn Cheol-soo still in there for Bundang, whatever vision he might espouse. But I'm wondering if the focus will eventually shift somehow toward a younger generation of politicians if they can find their way in. Maybe these teenagers won't necessarily win this year, given that they're so often affiliated with the Justice Party, but maybe in years to come, or in the interim between now and the next round of elections, we'll start to see some younger faces begin to coalesce and raise a whole lot of issues that the mainstream figures so far seem to be neglecting.
Right, so overall, in general, Korean politics may need to get younger overall.